Strong, for decades, huge numbers of women have complained that changes to their pension age caught them unawares and resulted in delayed retirements or reduced benefits. Now, a report by the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman says the changes weren't properly communicated and has recommended compensation for the affected women of up to almost £3,000. But the recommendation has raised eyebrows among a vocal group of younger observers, some saying it was the women's responsibility to understand their pension entitlements. To debate this, I'm joined by GB News' own Albie Amankona and political commentator and author Joe Phillips. Welcome to both to this programme. Joe, the bare bones of this issue, please.
So the bare bones are that this goes back to the mid-90s, when I think Kenneth Clarke was actually the Chancellor. So we knew that the pension age of retirement, state pension, was going to have to go up at some point. And so it rumbled on through various governments, umpteen chancellors, and so on and so forth. And then we knew that the men's age was going to go up, and the women's age, which had been 60, suddenly went from 60 to 66. And it was very badly communicated. I mean, I'm one of the women affected by this, and there are millions and millions of women. And this isn't so much about compensation, it's about absolute incompetence at communicating something so very important. And it's had a huge impact on many, many women, some of whom assumed they were going to retire at 60. That allows them to do other things, whether it's childcare for grandchildren or whether it's looking after older parents, or retire, or, you know, many other things. It's their choice. It also makes a huge difference between, you know, if you're maybe you've got a bad back, let's say, or something like that. If you retire at 58, thinking, well, I'll take early retirement, but I'm going to get my pension when I'm 60. All of a sudden it's 66, so you've got another 8 years before you get that pension. And it has been badly communicated. I'm not entirely sure that I agree with the idea of compensation to everybody, because some people have been, you know, adversely affected much more than many others. And I think also if you start a process of having to put appeals in, it will take longer than most of us have got left. And it will cost more than it would to just give everybody, you know, £1,000 worth of premium bonds or something.
I'm slightly puzzled by the amount. I mean, obviously this is historic and the pension used to be less than it is today. But we're approaching a position where the pension, you know, the basic pension is going to be about £1,000 a month.
Yes.
So this idea that you give compensation of up to £3,000 for what appear to be quite major differences in people's understanding and their anticipation, it doesn't seem like a huge amount of money.
No, it doesn't. And there are many women who have been part of the WASPI campaign who reckon that they have lost tens of thousands of pounds in, you know, lost earnings, lost investments. You know, it has an impact on ability to get a mortgage, you know, ability to get loans, all sorts of things. And I think what it is it's an absolutely stunning failure of successive governments. But I mean, this came up in about 2005, 2006, when the government could have could have done more about it. But it's disappeared into the background, and you can't help think, I wonder if it would have been the same if it'd been men that suddenly had a 6-year jump. If they'd staggered it, so if they'd said, OK, if you were born in 1956, it'll go up by a year, so you retire at 61, if you're born in and so on. You know, it's been badly handled. But the interesting thing of the Ombudsman's report is that they put it straight before Parliament, and you know how this works, Michael, instead of it going round the Houses before it's laid before Parliament. Because they have, although they've had some cooperation with DWP, Department for Work and Pensions, the DWP has made it very clear that they will not cooperate.
They resist it.
So it's gone to Parliament straight away.
Albie, I'm sorry to keep waiting for so long. Thank you for your patience. What do you make of all this?
Well, as someone who was born in the mid-90s, a lot of this happened before my time, at least before my time politically. And I think for a lot of younger people, they feel when they hear about the WASPI women Well, so what? The retirement age was equalised from 60 to 65. A lot of us think, well, actually, why was the state pension different for men and women in the first place? Some people think, well, if there was anyone that should get compensation, shouldn't it be the men that had to work for an extra 5 years for the whole time that the state pension wasn't equalised? Perhaps that's a conversation we should be having. But I think on the specific point about compensation, it is, should this be a public spending priority? We've heard today from Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, that the Conservatives are going to commit to the triple lock on state pensions. The Labour Party will probably do that as well. This is a proportion of the population that already disproportionately gets a lot of public spending on healthcare, on social care, on pensions, on free bus passes, on other things. So is it really a public spending priority to give people, yes, there might have been an injustice, it could have been better communicated, but to give people compensation when actually a large proportion of taxpayers' money is already being spent on this part of the population when there are other groups in the population where money isn't being spent very much? And also, Michael, I'm sure you'll appreciate this a lot, we need to be spending a lot more on defence in this era where we're entering a period of a lot more unstable international relations. Is this really a public spending priority for a government in 2024? A lot of young people say no.
It's interesting that you call them a part of the population. I mean, another way of looking at it is that it's a period through which everybody passes. Well, if they're lucky, everyone passes. So there are periods in your life where you consume quite a lot. I mean, school children consume an awful lot. You know, a lot of my taxes go towards educating children. Then there'll be a period of your life where you are beginning to earn, where you're not getting so much from the state. And then there's a period when you're in ill health and you have more of the needs and you stop working because you're too old to work. And the state intervenes and helps you in that period. Why do you call it a portion of the population rather than a stage of life through which, with luck, everybody passes?
Because it is a part of the population. We can get upset about semantics, Michael, but it is a part of the population which disproportionately benefits from taxpayers' money. Children are another part of the population. We're not talking about children today, we're talking about pensioners. And I'm not saying I have any ill will towards my taxpayers' money going towards people who are dependents on the state. I think that is important. My point is whether or not a public spending priority is that we spend more money on a part of the population that already receives disproportionately a lot in taxpayer funding.
Were you pleased that the Chancellor cut national insurance contributions in the sense that that is something from which pensioners do not benefit because they don't pay national insurance contributions? Therefore, what's happening to pensioners is that with fiscal drag, they're being drawn more and more into taxation. It seems now that the basic pension will soon be drawn into taxation, even if that's your only income. Are you happy? Because that looks like the Chancellor trying to redress part of the problem that you're identifying.
Look, I am a Tory. I support any tax cut. I think the national insurance tax cut was an interesting way to cut tax, but ultimately, with fiscal drag, as you mentioned, people are still paying more tax now than they have been in periods in the past. So whether or not it's actually a real terms tax cut is a different question. But even with the tax cuts that we have seen, again, I would say, are there other public spending priorities that money could have gone to, which wasn't a tax cut? For example, defence. I think we're going to be having a big conversation about defence in the 21st century, a conversation that we've not had maybe for 50, 100 years, in that we really do need to be spending more on defence, and our tax cuts and topping up pensions really going to be public spending priorities for either Conservative governments or Labour governments in the 21st century.
It's also my tip that the Labour government may find itself, the next Labour government may find itself dominated by the security and defence issue. But, Jo, what do you make of this kind of intergenerational rivalry or unhappiness?
I mean, I can see the point from younger people's view. I mean, what is interesting, as you and I know, people over 60 and over 65, the turnout at the last election from that age group was about 77%. Under 30, it's about 53%. So the answer to young people is actually you need to get out, you need to get involved in politics, you need to be voting, you need to make your voice heard. But this, it's funny, isn't it? Pensioners are the only group of people that we define by the benefit that they receive, which is wrong, because actually, you know, they are people, many of whom are still working. They might be retired teachers, they might be retired doctors, nurses, builders, you know, you name it. And yet we lump them into this group. And somebody in their 60s who might be still working and very active is considerably different to somebody in their 90s, in most cases. And I think, you know, there's a great danger that we've seen this, in fact, it was in the news, wasn't it? Aaron was referring to it, this division. We don't need division, but all politicians need to know you don't underestimate the Women's Institute. Remember what happened to Tony Blair?
I do indeed. And the WASPI campaign has certainly achieved a considerable success with this opinion given by the Ombudsman. So thank you very much to Joe Phillips and Albie Amankona.